is the beginning of tape number 2 in the deposition of Brad Nelson in the case of Democratic Party of Pima County versus Pima County Board of Supervisors et al. The time is 10:36 a.m. We're back on record.
Although I can't recall my exact question, I was asking you, I believe, if you had read or were familiar with the University of Connecticut report, which would have it dated October 30, 2006.
No, I haven't.
How about, and then I think you said the Princeton report, or what's your extent of knowledge on that?
If it's the one I'm somewhat familiar with, it pertains to a Depo piece of equipment that we do not have installed here within Pima County, so I did nothing more than peruse it.
And what's your understanding of the difference between the equipment that Princeton looked at and the equipment that Pima County uses?
There may be many differences that I'm unaware of, but the chief one that I am aware of is that the equipment that we have does have the voter verified paper trail, whereas the equipment that I believe is the focus of the Princeton study does not.
Okay. So the Princeton study is the Depo touchscreen, what they call the TS machine.
It's my understanding.
Pima County has the Depo touchscreen TSX machine, correct?
Correct.
Which has a prints a little tape.
Correct.
Okay. Now, do you know of any difference between the memory card that's used in the TS and the TSX?
I do not know.
Okay. And would you agree that the Princeton report talked about the vulnerability of the memory card?
Objection from?
I don't recall reading that part of the Princeton report.
Okay. What were the vulnerabilities in the Princeton report that would not be in our TSX machine?
I have no idea.
Are you familiar with a report that the state of California in, I believe, February of 2006, it's called the Security Analysis of D-Bold AccuBasic Interpreter, and it was printed and produced at the request of the California Secretary of State. Are you familiar with that report?
I know many reports came out of California, so I don't recall at this particular point in time that particular report.
What reports do you recall out of California?
The thing that I remember out of California was, and again, this is to give you a date, as best as I can recall, was in advance of 2006, perhaps in the early part of 2006. I believe that there had been a change within the office of who actually was the Secretary of State, and that a recertification, if that's the correct phrase to use, of Diebold equipment was ongoing within the state of California, I think related exclusively to the touchscreen, meaning TSX machines. And so I was interested in some of the outcomes of those tests, but I can't remember whether there was a specific study that I looked at.
Are you familiar with the CompuWare report from the state of Ohio?
No.
How about either of the Maryland reports, the RABA or the SAIC report?
I know that there was the RABA report, and I can't remember the abbreviation for the other organization. Again, my recall, which is vague, is that again is pertain to equipment that we do not have here in Pima County. It was the TS machine.
But you don't know what differences there are other than the printer between the TS and the TSX.
There may be major ones, but I don't know.
And did you not familiarize yourself with those reports because our guy has a printer and the TS doesn't?
Objection form.
It seemed more pertinent to try and understand the TSX, the actual equipment that we were going to be using.
Yeah. And so what did you do to understand the TSX?
Well, certainly I was interested in the, again, and I'm not certain what the correct terminology was, but I believe in either late 2005 or early 2006, under the direction of the California Secretary of State, the TSX machines, I'm going to say arbitrarily, approximately 100 machines, had gone through about 10 hours of testing. And I read some of the information that pertained to that particular piece of equipment. Trying to think what else, the TSX. I was very interested in what other jurisdictions across the United States might have been getting TSXs as they were trying to comply with HAVA. But I think that's about the basis of it.
Okay. Say on a California test you're talking about, what was the failure rate on that test?
I do not recall.
Do you recall if it exceeded 20%?
Oh, I do not recall.
Do you know what Visual Basic Script is?
No.
And you earlier talked about having looked at the audit log, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, with the GEMS. Are you aware that the GEMS audit log is part of the data file itself?
I do not know that.
And do you know what problem that would create if the audit log is part of the data file itself?
Objection form.
No.
You know what's called forking? Does that term mean anything to you in the computer world?
No.
Are you, when you looked at the TSX, were you aware in your studies that it used, its data was processed by a remote access server called RAS?
Objection form.
No.
What's your understanding of what the vulnerabilities are of our AccuVote machine?
Well, they need to be treated the same as a paper ballot in all aspects once an election is defined on the equipment.
Well, yes, if you this, I think, University of the University of Connecticut report, and it's dated October 30, 2006. In reference to the Depo AccuVote optical scan voting terminal, AVOS. Is that the one we used?
I believe that's how it's described.
It says that, I'll read this. In particular, we show, this is University of Connecticut, that even if the memory card is sealed and pre-election testing is performed, one can carry out a devastating array of attacks against an election using only off-the-shelf equipment and without having ever to access the card physically or opening the AVOS system box.
Objection.
Are you aware that that could be done?
No.
What do you know about Depo Corporation's reputation for candidness with election officials?
Nothing.
Our Pima County Central computer, do you know where it was purchased?
I'm not certain I understand the question. Are you looking for a physical city, a town, or?
Would you agree that Pima County bought its Central computer from Dell Corporation?
I'm not certain how to answer. Certainly the equipment is Dell equipment.
Okay. And do you know that, or is it true that the equipment when purchased by Pima County was shipped directly to Depo?
That is my understanding.
And are you aware that Depo built, they built the entire operating system of that computer?
I don't know that.
Do you know what everything that Depo put into the computer?
No, I do not.
Do you know if any hardware changes were made or chips added?
No, I do not.
Do you know if anyone in your department has examined the machine to see what was put into it or what changes were made by that Depo?
I do not.
If Depo had put in extra programs, how could Pima County learn whether they had done so?
Again, I'm not a technical person. I do have no idea.
Are you aware of Depo's history, corporate history of changing software and calling it off-the-shelf software, or COTS, C-O-T-S?
Objection, form.
Let me see if I understand.
Yeah.
I'm somewhat familiar with the term COTS, and that is if I go to a particular software vendor, CompUSA or something like that, and buy a piece of software off of a shelf, that's a COTS.
Yeah.
And your question is has Depo represented a COTS system as their own?
No. Has Depo represented, for instance, to what's called an ITA, an independent testing agency, that software that they've changed is in fact off the shelf, when it's not true that it's off the shelf because they made changes?
Objection, form.
I understand your question. I don't know.
Okay. Who certified the software that Pima County currently uses?
The certification process is, to my knowledge, is twofold. It was certified by independent testing authorities, and there was probably more than one involved, because some of the hardware is tested by some labs and some of the software is tested by others. I do not recall which labs were involved at the national level. At the state level, once a system is certified, it is the Secretary of State's Certification Committee.
Do you know if a company called Cyber certified some of the software Pima County is using?
I do not know.
Are you aware that the Federal Election Commission has prohibited, as of, I believe, last summer, of June, of Cyber from certifying software?
I don't believe
software for election software.
I don't believe it's the Federal Elections Commission that is involved in that process.
Yeah. Actually, when I asked the question, I think you're right. who is it that's involved with that?
It is in a process of change. I believe the organization may be the Elections Assistance Commission, the EAC.
Okay. EAC. But anyway, are you aware that as of June 2006, cyber's prohibited from certifying software?
I know there is an issue between the EAC and that organization, but I'm not certain whether prohibited is the correct word. I don't know whether it's a suspension or what is involved, but something's wrong.
Okay. Why were they suspended?
From what I've read, certainly I've not spoken to anybody about the situation, is that it appears that some of the processes that laboratory may have been involved in may have been actually exercised but not documented sufficiently for the EAC.
Are you aware that cyber claims that Depo lied to them and told them that some of their software was COTS when it was not off the shelf,
Objection.
and that
Form.
Depo had in fact changed it?
No, I'm not.
Do you know whether the Windows CE was modified by Depo?
I do not.
And by that I'm speaking about the Windows CE that would be on your central account computer.
Objection.
Bill, once again, we're getting into points where you're so far off field and having to do with the reports that you're seeking. Now we can go and talk to the judge and see if this line can continue, or you can carry on with relevant information regarding the reports that are the subject of this lawsuit.
Well, Karen, I believe that these questions are appropriate questions under the deposition rules.
Bill, I believe that you're attempting to attain information that could be not in the best interest of the county to release, that may have some protections. I'd be more than happy to go and talk to the judge.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand your objection. Your objection is that my questions about the knowledge of the Pima County Elections Director's software and central count computer that counts all our ballots, that it would not be in the Pima County's interest to have him answer those questions. Is that right?
No, my objection is that you are getting into the nitty-gritty of how things are tabulated, which is not Brad's forte in the first place, but rather deals with not obtaining the reports that you're seeking, but obtaining information regarding the database, regarding the operation, regarding the ability for you or anyone else to hack into the system, and that is information that is not in the best interest of the county to release. And you're not dealing with the issue at hand, which is the reports that you wish access to.
I am dealing with issues related to this lawsuit. My questions are appropriate. I have asked no questions. You're talking about the nitty-gritty of how things are tabulated. You know, the truth is, that is an appropriate subject, although the questions that you have objected to weren't on that particular topic. But generally speaking, the nitty-gritty of how votes are counted in Pima County is quite appropriate to this lawsuit, and quite appropriate questions, Karen.
Not when all you're seeking is access to records that are in the vault. It's not appropriate at all.
Well, look, you can instruct him not to answer.
I know what my abilities are, Bill.
Okay, well, then
I'm telling you now that if it continues in this vein, we'll go to the judge and get it stopped.
are you aware of whether Depo has modified the Windows 2000 base operating system on our central computer?
I'm sorry. Repeat.
Do you know? This is a yes or no question, I guess. Whether are you aware whether Depo modified the Windows 2000 on the base operating system of our central computer?
I do not know.
There's one more.
How can Pima County determine if there's any malicious code that's been introduced into its machine?
Object. Okay, let's go get the judge.
Shall I unhook her?
Time is 11:06 for background record.
I believe my last question, sir, when we took a break, was how can Pima County determine if malicious code had been introduced into its machines?
I do not know.
In the
I don't think that matters.
oh, okay. So we're ready. Mr. Nelson, in the 2006 primary election, were any summary reports printed before Election Day that showed the results of actual votes cast?
Yes.
How many?
To my knowledge, 4.
Who printed them?
I was not there at the time that they were generated. I assume it's Mr. Crane.
Why were they printed?
As the primary election day was approaching, the various aspects of the new law, generally called Senate Bill 1557, that deals with the audits, was going through various stages of Department of Justice pre-clearance. The entirety of the new law had not yet been pre-cleared. However, there was the possibility that it could have been in advance of the primary election day, which was September the 12th. So it was determined by me that some batches needed to be generated in case there needed to be an early ballot audit.
Were the political parties informed that you would be printing summary reports and taking sample batches?
No, they were not, in that the law had not yet brought about that requirement.
So you, see if I understand this, the law, and I know it by 1557, I forget the, is it 621G or something?
I think it's 16602 and then whatever the appropriate letter is.
But anyway, those requirements for the audit boxes, can we use that term, require political party representatives to be present, correct?
That's what the law says, yes.
Yeah. And are you familiar with the procedure that's used when those reports are printed with the presence of the political parties?
I'm not certain I understand your question. I have an understanding of what it says in the procedures pertaining to the process.
Yeah. Well, tell me what your understanding is.
My understanding is that as early ballots are being processed, by that I mean tabulated, political party observers would then say it is now time to designate a batch for auditing purposes. The counting, if any, was going on, would then stop. A baseline unofficial tally report would be generated. A predetermined number of early ballots, arbitrarily let's say 500, would then be run through the counting devices, and then a post-batch, if you will, unofficial tally would be generated at that time. The baseline report, the ballots subject to that batch, and then that final report, if you will, concerning that batch, then would be sequestered for possible audit later on.
And the political party representative would designate when a sample batch should be made. Would that be correct?
That's correct. Certainly there'll be more than one political party representative in the room. I assume it's a consensus.
And is it your understanding that those reports that are printed are not to be read?
That is correct.
And it's important that no one not know what the actual contents are because until after the election, because that tells you who's winning or losing, right?
Correct. That is correct.
And is it correct that for that procedure, it requires 2 summary reports, one before and one after?
Loosely, the answer is yes. Again, the law doesn't say summary reports, but I understand what you're saying, yes.
And did you, what instructions did you give your staff in the 206 primary when they were to print these without political parties being notified or present?
It was my understanding that, I should say it's my recall, that I had a telephone conversation with Mr. Crane telling him that there was that possibility and that he should make some batches. I don't know whether I designated the number.
Yeah. And had the Secretary of State advised you of the procedures at that point?
I can't recall whether the procedures had yet been pre-cleared. There were, I believe the copies of the procedures may have been available.
Yeah. And when you say pre-cleared, that means that somebody in the Justice Department says, yep, what you're planning to do is okay.
Correct.
Okay. But you believe that the Secretary of State's recommended procedures that ultimately were approved were known to you then?
Some of them were still in a state of flux. Most prominently, the variances involved, which did not get pre-cleared until October the 19th. But as my recall is that the statute, 1557, if we will, had been pre-cleared, but the procedures had been drafted, perhaps approved by the Attorney General and the Governor, but may have still been subject to pre-clearance by DOJ at that time.
And of course, the variance is simply related to what difference in the counts would occur when those batches were counted and audited.
Correct.
Post-election.
Correct.
Did you tell Mr. Crane how many batches to make?
I don't believe I mentioned a number.
So do you understand that you told him, I want some audit back? What did you tell him?
Again, it was an informal telephone call. I believe that I said that in the possibility that the law meaning 1557 was pre-cleared, we needed to be prepared to have some audit batches. I think that was basically it. Now, whether he even had ballots available to count on the day that we had that conversation, and I can't recall what day it was, but it was, I'm guessing, maybe 3 to 4 days prior to Election Day.
Did you talk to him about not reading the actual numbers as to who's winning or losing?
That was not part of our conversation.
Do you know how many sample batches he, in fact, produced in the way that you asked him to?
I wasn't physically there when they were produced. My review of some of the logs that were that I reviewed in January seems to suggest that there were 2.
And why do you think that there were 2 based on your review of the logs?
I believe there is a notation for a summary report and then a summary report thereafter. Again, I'm not technical in nature. That would seem to distinguish that there was a batch of ballots ran in between.
Isn't it true that when you reviewed that, in fact, only 3 summary reports had been printed?
I don't recall that. Okay.
And isn't it true that one of them was simply a peek? There was a summary, a preview, and then a print of a summary report?
I don't recall.
Yeah. Let's assume there was a preview and a summary report. How would a preview be used later in auditing a sample batch?
I don't know.
You couldn't use it later unless you had a note paper and went to the trouble of writing down whatever was on the preview instead of printing it. Wouldn't that be true?
Objection form.
I don't know the process involved, so I'm not certain what a preview. I can only guess, but I don't know what a preview would be available for.
Okay. Well, let's, I don't either, but let's use a little bit of a common sense. And I thought we looked at this before. Don't you think a preview brings up information on a screen that you get to read?
I think the header, in other words, how a particular report may be titled, appears. I don't know what else may appear. I don't think the entirety of the election appears.
Yeah. But when you're previewing a summary report, do you think that it would be on the screen, the contents of what would be in a summary report, if you were to print a summary report?
I've never done a print preview myself.
Yeah.
My very basic understanding is that that only the header and perhaps some of the election content, if you will, is visible on a print preview, not the entirety of the election process.
And who told you that?
It's just the discussions that I've heard and the discussions that the political parties and I have had with Dr. Moffat when it was described to me what a print preview was. I really wasn't sure what it was. My understanding is that it may be, again, may be a process to make sure that the header shows the appropriate text, that this is a batch number 9 or batch number 52 or what have you. And you'll look at the preview to make sure that the header is text correctly.
Do you know what the election center is?
Yes.
Tell the judge what it is.
To the best of my description, it is an organization of election officials at state, probably federal, and county levels. That's a organization Let me see, how would I best describe it? I would describe it best as an educational organization.
And you yourself have been educated by that organization, have you not?
I've been to some workshops, yes.
Yeah. And you have also participated in that organization in other ways, have you not?
I'm not certain what you mean by participate.
Okay, let me ask you this. Were you on a member of the Election Center Research and Technology Committee?
I was.
Yeah. And what years were you on that?
I don't think it ever formed, to tell you the truth. It was an organization within the Election Center of, I want to say, maybe 5 or 6 people, and we never met.
You know how you were selected to be on the Technology Committee?
I asked to be part of it.
Why was that?
I wanted more exposure to what was going on within the United States as far as the election arena was concerned.
And in 2002, were you a member of the Arizona State Planning Committee for the Help America Vote Act?
Yes, I was.
And was that committee ever formed?
Yes, it was.
And what did they do?
My understanding is the committee may have been a requirement under HAVA that the Secretary of State, as the chief election official of the state under HAVA, had to convene a committee to come up with the state's individual HAVA plan.
And what kind of issues would have been involved with the state's HAVA plan?
Well, certainly the push, if that's the correct phrase, at that time with the Secretary of State was to move those jurisdictions within Arizona that were still on punch cards onto what eventually became optical scans. So a big part of the Arizona State's HAVA plan at that time was a subset within the plan called Adios Chad in order to get rid of punch cards. That was the focus as the as the committee was first meeting. However, also parts of those meetings were, again, part of HAVA to make certain that jurisdictions within the state of Arizona were on their way to acquiring voting devices that would prove to be accessible to the disabled.
Were there any discussions on that committee relating to technology and security?
Not to my recall.
Are you aware that there are various blogs and sites on the internet where one can stay current on election security issues?
Objection form.
There are some blogs, and I don't even know how best to define a blog. Certainly I look at electionline.org. I don't know whether that would be one of the organizations that you may mention. Black box voting is a prominent one as well that I will review from time to time. Those are the two that come to my mind most often.
What's it called?
Electionline.org. A brief definition of that blog is they apparently have some kind of search engine, if that's even the right term, that goes out and finds news articles that have been posted throughout the United States, and that's one place you can go and see all the articles about elections administration going on.
You mentioned black box voting.
Mm-hmm.
Was that Bev Harris's site?
I've never met Bev, but I believe that is her site.
Yeah. And how often do you look at have you looked at the black box voting site?
Usually I go to their main page and see if anything has been updated since the last time I was there, so maybe on a weekly basis.
And on the frequency of a weekly basis, is that recently, or has that been over the last couple of years?
It's been a weekly basis probably since I became aware of the organization. I did not really become aware of the organization until, and I don't know how long the organization's been in operation, but I want to say maybe 2 to 3, well, maybe 3 to 4 years ago.
It's not something you've ever looked at like on a daily basis, is it?
It's possible, but not every day of the year, no.
No. When do you think you've looked at it on a daily basis, if you've done that?
Forgive me one moment, please. Certainly my schedule around election days gets a little hectic. And if there has been an issue on black box voting that pertains to Pima County, and by that I mean it may be something about our equipment or our procedures or things of that nature, I may look more often. But if what's hot on the on black box voting pertains to another vendor, say another, by not another vendor I mean another elections equipment vendor, I probably don't look that often. So during an election period, if my schedule allows, it may be twice weekly.
When did you first become aware of black box voting and look at that site?
My goodness. I'm trying to think of how I did become aware of that organization. I don't recall what motivated me to go to it.
2 years ago, 1 year ago, 3 years ago?
Well, I know one of the things that I recall, and again, I mean no disrespect, but Ms. Harris, pardon me, visited my old county, Mojave County, and I want to say that was maybe 3 to 4 years ago, and talked to the present elections director there. And when I heard that organization had been to Mojave County, I think that's the first time my ears really picked up about it.
What's your understanding of the thrust of that organization? You know, its goals, what are they about?
I would say election integrity.
Would you say that they're trying to ensure the accuracy and high security and of elections?
Certainly, I wouldn't say that's their only goal, but certainly that is a goal of the organization.
Yeah. And do you know Jim March?
I do.
Do you know what his association might be with that organization?
I know there is an association, but what his title or his responsibilities are within the organization, I'm not certain.
Yeah. Do you know that Jim has consulted with the Democratic Party from time to time?
Pima
County Democratic Party.
Yes.
And did you first meet him at your offices after the May 16, 2006 bond election?
That is when I first met him, yes.
Yeah. And was he accompanied by the Pima County Democratic chair?
Yes.
And was he introduced to you as a consultant for the Pima County Democratic Party?
I can't remember the exact words, as I believe Ms. Branch Gilby introduced him, but it was words to that effect.
Yeah. And at that time, was there a request for Mr. March to look at the county central computer to determine what cables were attached to it and that sort of thing?
There was.
Yeah. And you denied him the ability, did you not?
I did.
And at that time that you denied him the ability, the room where the computer was not in use, correct?
I'm not certain what you may define as not in use. There were ballots inside of the room.
Okay. Here's what I mean. There were no people in that room, correct?
Oh, My recall, again, this has been a little while, is that there was physically no one in that room.
And the equipment, the central count equipment, was not being utilized, obviously, at that moment, correct? And the request was that he simply walk into that room in your presence and look at the equipment, correct?
That's my recall.
And you said no.
That's correct.
Why?
Because we had a live election still at that time, and there were voted ballots in that room.
Uh-huh. And are you aware that when ballots are really alive and being counted, that political party observers are to be present?
During partisan elections, yes.
Yeah. And you think that election was different?
It's not a partisan election.
Yeah. You think that is a different situation?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And is it your belief that for a nonpartisan election, such as a bond election, that political party representatives have no right to be present?
The law doesn't require them to be there.
Yeah. Is it your position that political party representatives are not permitted to be present at any nonpartisan election?
Within the counting center, yes.
Yeah. So all of the counting of ballots in non-party elections can be done by your staff with no outside observation. Is that your understanding?
No. Certainly during that election, which was the RTA election, psychiatric health care questions, I believe, as well as the town of Oro Valley had, I believe, a council race or at least a candidate's race on that ballot as well. There was the possibility of the town clerk being there because she is the chief election official of her election, her meaning she's a female.
Okay. But it's your view that only the Oro Valley town clerk could be there in that election, and that strictly Pima County employees with no political party observation can do the entire election?
That's correct.
Does that strike you as a very secure and proper situation?
Objection. One.
Observation can still be done. As you are perhaps recall, there was the ability to observe through the glass through the entire election process. So it is not behind closed doors and closed windows that nobody can see what's going on. There is the availability of any member of the public to come and observe.
Do you know whether or not at that time, well, I've already asked you, and you've said that the Democratic Party's technical person wanted to look to see what cables were connected, correct?
That is correct.
The question is, were Ethernet cables going out of sight through a door to the right at that time?
I'm not technical enough to know what an Ethernet cable is. Certainly there was a printing device, an HP printer, that was on the opposite side of that wall, but how it was connected I couldn't say.
Could those...
It looks like that. The cable was...
I don't.
I'm holding in my hand some blue cables. Did it look like this?
It was cable, that's all I can tell you.
Could those same cables have been connected to a computer in the next room?
I don't know.
In that case, if people had been in the hall, as you say, looking at the computer, how could they know what was at the other end of a cable that went to a different room?
They would not.
So then, I take it you agree then that simply looking through the window would not, no one would be fundamentally capable of overseeing the election and knowing if that aspect was being properly handled.
Objection form.
They would certainly be able to see all of the ballots that were being processed in that room.
And that wouldn't tell them squat, would it?
I wouldn't have any idea what it might tell them.
There have been a number of security changes within the last months, have there not?
Could you elaborate on what you mean by security? I think I know, but...
Sure. Well, let me ask you one thing. I'd ask you about Jim March. Do you recall if he gave a written report with security suggestions to the Pima County Elections Department?
I'm not certain whether it was Mr. March or Mr. Donahue, but I believe there were some suggestions provided.
Let me ask you, at the facility, what do you call it, Building 27?
That'll be good enough.
Yeah, okay. There are cameras there now, correct?
That is correct.
And how many cameras?
I believe there are 17 physical cameras.
And are those cameras there at the request of the Democratic Party?
Certainly it was a recommendation.
And are all of the cables currently exposed at that site?
By cables, again, I'm going to need a little definition. I believe that you mean within the counting center?
Yes.
Yes, they are.
And is that again at a recommendation of the Democratic Party?
I believe it is.
Do you know if there is a check that occurs to see if there's any Wi-Fi connected?
Again, you're getting in a technical area, but my understanding is an individual through Dr. Moffitt's organization was monitoring on election night that facility to make sure that no Wi-Fi was going on.
You know if that was a recommendation from the Democratic Party?
I don't know whether that was or not.
Do you know whether the phone-in remote access server, that RAS device that processes data from the TSX machine, do you know if that was disabled?
Objection form.
At the recommendation of the Democratic Party.
You use some terms that I'm not familiar with there, so...
In other words, this touchscreen machine that y'all use, the TSX, it's designed to have a modem to phone in the results to the central computer. And I believe that it phones in data and it goes through something called a RAS, a remote access server. And I believe that our Democratic Party representatives recommended, and John Moffitt agreed, that RAS should be disabled so that those machines are actually physically brought in, or the cards, and there's not remote connections to RAS.
I think that was a joint effort by both the party and the county, yes.
The central count computer is now in a locked cabinet with seals.
Correct.
Correct? And was that a recommendation also of the party?
I don't recall.
Do you know if seals on doors was a recommendation of the party?
Doors?
Well, certain doors, it's my understanding, for instance, the door into that room itself would have a seal on it that was put. Do you know if that's the case? Or?
That is not the case. My understanding is that, and I don't know whether this was something that perhaps Dr. Moffitt initiated or perhaps jointly initiated, but there is now an electronic access system that is, one has to have a card key or whatever the appropriate term is to get through the door, and it logs in who's coming in and who's going out.
No, I can. Well, let me ask you again. Do you know if there were additional monitors, a secondary viewer monitor that was installed at the request of the Democratic Party?
Again, I'm not certain. Certainly, I can't say it was exclusively a recommendation of the Democratic Party, but I believe that it was, and that a second monitor was presented so that individuals standing out in the lobby area could see what was going on the GEMS computer.
Right. And that the printer and the computer are in the same room.
Yes, they are.
Is that, again, a security request from the Democratic Party?
I believe it was. Certainly the physical makeup of the previous location didn't allow for it. We've just moved into the new facility.
I mentioned Jim March. Did you have meetings with Mickey Donahoe on behalf of the Democratic Party relating to security concerns?
Yes, though I can't remember specific dates involved.
Has Democratic Party participation in increasing security been helpful to your department?
Yes.
In any way has the Democratic Party's request for increased security interfered with the operation of your department or been negative for the department in accomplishing its goals?
No.
The Democratic Party, you had talked before about the process of summary ballots and batches used in the general election in 2006 to post-election verify the accuracy of the early ballot count. Correct? Those batches were all done with political party observers present, not just Democratic Party observers. Would that be correct?
I wasn't there when probably 100% of the batches were being generated, but that is my understanding.
Okay, or at least we can be sure that the parties were informed, whether or not if everybody showed up
Yes,
or not.
I believe so.
Yeah. The Democratic Party has asked to see the summary reports that were printed as a part of that process. Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am.
And that those reports were put in, were those reports put in with the ballots and turned over to the treasurer?
That is my understanding.
Who made this decision to seal the early ballots, scan summary reports in the vault with the ballots?
I don't know whether there was a decision process involved. It was a situation to where we were moving the ballots. When I say we, I mean members of my staff. We're moving the ballots from the box. I am sorry, let me turn this off. I said off. There we go. As the ballots were being taken out of the boxes, and these are not just the batches of that were for auditing purposes, but all of the early ballots that were processed, they are required to be put into a standard size box for storage within the treasurer's facility. So those ballots were being moved from the interim boxes, if you will, into these standardized boxes. When it came time to move the ballots from the designated batches of boxes, the ballots and the batches went into the boxes, these standardized boxes.
Does the Pima County Election Department have an objection to opening the boxes to take out the summary reports?
My understanding is that once the election material has been sealed and delivered to the treasurer, that it only comes out with the order of a Superior Court judge.
And I guess what I'm trying to get at here is not sort of a discussion of that, of the law itself,
Okay.
but the physical process of having observers present and retrieving them from the box. Except for the law that might require an order, is there any objection that your department would have?
No.
And in fact, would it not facilitate your understanding of what happened to these summary reports if they can be accounted for in the boxes?
Objection form.
It may.
Yeah. And what if it turns out that several summary reports would be missing?
Objection.
Would that tell us anything?
I don't know.
During the post-election audit, when the precinct level vote totals were printed prior to selection of precincts to be audited, why were early ballot totals omitted from that report?
I think I understand what you... Could you repeat the question again?
Yeah. When the precinct level vote totals were printed prior to selection of precincts to be audited, why were early ballot totals omitted from that report?
I understand. It was just a misunderstanding on our part. It was the first time we'd ever produced such a report.
Okay. And who made the decision to omit early ballot?
I don't think there was a decision to omit. It was just as the report was being generated, they only supplied precinct level.
Do you know how many hours were consumed in counting early ballots?
Objection form.
No, I do not.
Do you know how many early ballots can be counted per hour by your department?
No, I do not.
You recall that Mickey Donahoe, on behalf of the Democratic Party, discussed with you the issue of when early ballots would be counted, when you would start counting early ballots.
I don't remember that exact question.
You recall that Mr. Donahoe was telling you that the Democratic Party wanted you to start counting early ballots late in the process, as late as you could.
No, I don't.
Yeah. And you recall that in spite of his request, you wanted to start counting the early ballots sooner.
Objection form.
It had been our practice in the past that after the completion of the official logic and accuracy test, that we start counting the early ballots that had been verified by the county recorder at that time.
Yeah. And that's as soon as the LNA testing is done.
And successful, yes.
This year, the LNA testing was done 2 weeks before the general election, wasn't it?
For the first time, yes.
Okay. And how many total early ballots would have been counted prior to election day?
I don't recall.
Do you know how long it takes or took Maricopa County to count their early ballots?
No, I do not.
Was there any reason why it would have been necessary to start counting early ballots 2 weeks before election day?
As I say, it had just been our practice in the past that immediately after a successful logic and accuracy test, we started counting earlies. Prior to the change in the law in 2006, that was 1 week out. So it was more of a reflex reaction, if you will, as the LNA's over. Let's start counting early ballots.
Yeah. Would you still consider it to be a reflex action if that decision had been made in spite of the specific requests by the Democratic Party that you delay the counting of early ballots?
I don't
Objection form.
I don't remember that exact request, but one of the things we like to do is buy as much time as we possibly can in the process in case an anomaly occurs. And with early ballots, particularly with this most recent general election, a lot of people, so I'm told, had no trouble whatsoever in marking their ballot on the front side of the ballots where the candidates were, but were taking an extremely long time studying the propositions on the back. And I think part of our concern was that we were going to get hit with a large volume of ballots at the very end, and then as many ballots as we could get processed, meaning tabulated, ahead of the game, the better.
Any problems arise
With?
the anomalies you were talking about?
No.
You were the president of some sort of organization, aren't you?
I still am the president of the election officials of Arizona.
And who are the members of that organization?
There is different levels of membership. Certainly, there are the voting members, who are the elections directors, although that may not be their actual title within their individual counties, and the state elections directors is the voting members of the body. There are other associate members, most often municipal clerks, sometimes members of recorders' offices, but the makeup as far as the voting body is concerned are the individual county elections directors.
Any staff to this organization?
No. There's an elected president, that's me, and there's an elected secretary-treasurer, that's one person filling both positions. The present incumbent is the elections director in Gila County.
What's that person's name?
Her name is Dixie, D-I-X-I-E, Munday, spelled M-U-N-D-Y.
And has this organization been in existence since you've been at Pima County?
Prior to that time, actually, my understanding of the structure is it is an affiliate organization of the Arizona Association of Counties.
The what?
The Arizona Association of Counties?
And do you have a budget?
No.
There
are dues that are paid, but there is no budget per se.
And the dues, I take it, are paid by the county.
That's correct.
And how often does this group meet?
Usually we meet in conjunction with that larger organization, the Arizona Association of Counties, twice a year meetings. However, their usual November meeting is right at the time when general elections are being held in even-numbered years. So we often do not meet Novembers of even-numbered years, but we meet usually in June, if conditions allow in November, and then we often conduct a workshop amongst ourselves in April.
And how long have you been president?
I believe this is my 6th year.
And how long have you been in the group?
Since '95.
Does the group have any publications?
No, they do not.
Does it have a computer listserv?
I'm not even sure what that is, so...
Yeah. Well, a listserv would be just a grouping of addresses of, for instance, all the members here, so that if some issue came up that you wanted to inform the other members in other counties about, that you could just type in, let's say, the name of your organization, and it would automatically go to all your voting members, for instance.
I understand. There is, the only thing that I have defined within my personal address book for my email system, it just says EOA voting members, but it's not something out there that other people tap.
Okay. And then if, let's say, some other county wants to send information to that group, so would they do the same thing, put EOA voting members?
I assume that they will define it in some term on their own individual email address book.
They do that, though. I mean, don't you all share information?
We try.
Yeah. And do you share information about the Depo system?
There is, and I believe this is part of HAVA, if I'm not mistaken, the necessity to have user groups within the state. And so there is a Depo user group, but it's not affiliated with the election officials of Arizona at all.
Okay. Tell me about that group.
I believe the current, I think that the term is facilitator, it's not even a president or anything like that, is that same individual, Dixie Monday. It is a title, if you will, that rotates through the various counties that are Depo customers. And so I believe Apache County has served as the facilitator, Tocanino County, and I think it's Helix County's turn right now.
Yeah. So what's the purpose of this Depo user group?
I don't know whether there is anything formal within the state plan other than it is almost a clearinghouse to where individuals can come and talk about concerns that they have had at their individual counties or successes that they've had at their individual counties. Tell that to the group. And then, although I don't think it has been done yet, in theory, the group then as a whole could approach Depo with some of their recommendations or concerns.
Okay. So am I right that 12 out of the Arizona counties use Depo equipment?
I think that's right.
And then, let's say that you became aware of a potential security problem with the software. Is this the kind of thing that you would disseminate among the Depo user group, or would you do it with the election officials?
Objection form.
Actually, the first place that I would probably go to would be to the Secretary of State's office, since she is the entity responsible for certifying the equipment.
Yeah. But, let's say that that you wanted to let the other counties know. Wouldn't you directly go to them through the organization that you're president of?
No, because not all of those are Depo users.
Yeah.
More than likely, although the occasion has not arisen to my knowledge, the individual would contact the facilitator of the Depo user group and say, hey, this is what we're experiencing in County X. Anybody else know anything about it?
So this Depo user group, have there been discussions in that group about software security problems?
Objection form.
Not to my knowledge.
Why not?
I think most of the discussions that were going on with the group were when they were moving from punch cards to optical scan. It was more of an education than it was an alert on any problems that they may have been having.
Well, from your going to black box voting, for you're aware of all these other reports in the nation, you are aware, are you not, that there's incredible discussion and a lot of information about security issues related to the Depo machines?
Objection form.
Depo as well as other manufacturers of equipment, yes.
Yeah. But, well, sure. Sequoia has similar problems, don't they?
Objection.
I'm not that familiar with the Sequoia product. I've never used it.
Okay. But you're Pima County Elections Director, and you use Depo equipment, and you know that 12 counties use Depo equipment, and you know that there are problems with it. So my question is, I fail to understand, and I'd like you to explain to me why there's not discussion among that Depo user group of these security problems with Depo software.
Objection form.
What security problems?
Yeah, the memory cards can contain viruses that could be undetectable. That they contain code, that interpretive code, that
It's a hack tool.
that Microsoft Access is a well-known hack tool and can be used to change data without even a password if access can be made to the computer.
Objection
No tracking
form.
of individual human actions.
I'm sorry, there was a lot going on right there.
Yeah. You know, the fact that, as we discussed earlier, you don't know who prints stuff. You can't track human actions because it says admin.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of issues. Seems like, I mean, you got to explain to me. I don't understand this. Seems like if we've got election directives and that there's known information about security problems, that you all would be talking back and forth about it.
I would suggest that the security has always been important, whether it's Diebold or any other individual, and within the Secretary of State's Procedures Manual, regardless of whether you're talking about memory cards of Diebold equipment or ES&S equipment or Optech equipment, that memory cards have to be treated with a high level of security.
Okay, but
And those are things that are discussed at such meetings.
yeah.
We have less than 5 minutes left.
Okay, let's change that.
Okay, the time is 12:02. We're done off record.
I handed it.